What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals, bringing you all the craziest sales stories I can find. I'm your host, Drew B. Wilson. I'm excited to be here with you. After 2 decades in sales, I realize that this is by far the greatest industry on the planet because of the amazing stories we get to learn and the fact that we literally get to write our own paychecks and build a life that we get to control. With that being said, I'm bringing you some of the greatest stories, some tactics, and everything you need to be successful on your sales journey. Today's guest, personal friend of mine, someone who has an equal 20 plus years in the sales industry, and someone who I've truly got to see build, lose, and rebuild, and really experience what it means to go through this process of being a sales professional through being a business owner. And I know he's got some wild-ass stories. So I'd like to welcome my friend, Mr. Doug Mitchell. What's up, brother?
Thank you for having me, brother. I couldn't be more excited about being on this podcast, man. This is your element, dude. This is everything you're about. So I'm so excited to see this thing flourish.
I appreciate that, man. And I know we've got a long history and we've shared many wild, amazing stories together. And one thing I'm excited to hear more about is some of those stories from you. But I want to get started, man. How did you get into sales, and what do you sell now?
Man, so my first experience in sales was Cutco knives. I did a stint with vector marketing for 6 months. That's where I learned a lot of the foundational stuff that I did in sales. But where I really started to get heavy into it, I was working for another entrepreneur. He had several different businesses, and one of them was a door-to-door sales company for AT&T. It was just crazy to me that these guys were going out knocking on doors, making $1,000 a week. That was a lot back then. You know, I was making $30,000 a year as a marketing manager. And so I was intrigued by it, so much so I asked him if I could step in and manage it when one of his managers left. And so I stepped in, started managing it, got the business back to black, and eventually owner financed it from him and grew it into a multi-million-dollar door-to-door sales company. My experience is a little different than most. You know, I started at the top being a manager. I sold for 90 days, and then after that, it was just about building systems and processes and scaling a very, very simple business, selling cable door-to-door.
That's awesome, man. And one thing I know about you is that you truly embody sales and processes and all things like nerdery when it comes to sales, which is one thing I love about you, because I'm also very much high on the nerdery scale. And I've seen you, and we've talked and had extensive conversations about that. But I want to go back to the old school, man. I want to share this whole podcast, this show is about finding crazy ass sales stories. So I need to know, man, in your 2+ decades of sales, you got a crazy Call the Damn Lead story you can share with us?
Absolutely, brother. I got one for you, and it involves the mob. So I think you're going to like it. I was probably my 6th week into business. I had owner financed that door-to-door sales company I was telling you guys about. And I realized that, hey, there was not enough month and not enough paycheck to pay my guys. So I was coming up short. Back then, AT&T paid, it was like a net 45 or something like that. So I had to pay my guys weekly, and I had to wait 6 weeks to get paid from AT&T. So basically what happened is sales went through the roof, and so I wasn't getting paid enough compared to what we were selling. So I had to pay my guys, and I basically ran out of money. I was $6,000 short. Right. And so I'm being very transparent. I tell my sales manager, hey, I've got to go find this money. Right. I'm calling every family member. I'm calling the guy that owner financed it to me. He's like, no, you're on your own. Too bad. I'm not going to finance that. Even though it was guaranteed money from AT&T. This is on installs. Right. But they pay net 45. So anyways, so my manager's like, hey, I know a guy. If you borrow $1,000 from him today, then you only have to pay him back $1,200 in 2 weeks, right? If you've got some experience with the street hustle, you know exactly what this is. You know what I'm saying? It's 20 points, right? And so I didn't know. I did not know. And so he gives me an address, and he says, hey, this is the guy. He's going to write your name down in a book, and you're going to sign it. So I go. I write my name down in the book. I write it for $6,000. I don't know what this guy was thinking. I mean, he saw my bank account, what was going through there. So, but he was an older gentleman, looked completely harmless, right? And so we're talking the next week. I already paid him back. I gave him his 20 points on top of that. And I'm talking to the sales manager, and he's like, "Hey, how did everything go? Did you get the money you needed? You know, obviously our paychecks are coming through, so I'm guessing you did." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, I did. The guy was great. It cost me 20%. That sucked, but we got everybody paid on time. That was super important to me." And so I'm talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, apparently he is affiliated with the mob." So I found out in that moment that I had borrowed money from the mob to pay my salespeople. So when I say I've done everything possible to get my guys paid on time, I've even borrowed money from the mob and risked my own life and limbs in order to make that happen. So that's my crazy sales story, crazy entrepreneur story, doing whatever it takes to get our guys paid sometimes.
20 freaking points, man. That is. I mean, it's like, I guess, going to the cashier check places these days, man. I'll never forget. My
Yeah.
mom used to go to those places, and they would bonk her right over the head. It's like, you're gonna get 500, and you're gonna pay us 750, and it's like, that don't make no fucking sense. What do you mean? But hey, man, when you're in a position like that, you got to do what you got to do, right? And that's one of the things I really love about you, Doug, is your willingness as a leader to step in and do whatever it takes for your team to make sure they get paid. And anyone who's listening to this that's in sales has been in a position where they've been out there fucking crushing it, and then their paycheck wasn't what it was supposed to be, or it got delayed because this, that, or whatever happened. And, I've experienced it myself. Thankfully, most of the guys I've worked for, when it's happened, they were good on it, and they're like, hey, man, I will make it right. What do we got to do? Like yourself. But then I've heard horror stories, man, of people that have, and I'm not going to mention any specific industries, but it has to do with the sun. And those poor guys, like, they do the whole ass thing, and they're not getting paid 6 months, 9 months, a year out. And so, hey, man, I know this is stuff that genuinely happens in the world of sales. But you as a leader stepping up to do that for your guys, man, not only is that a crazy ass story to learn that, like, oh shit, I could have been real fucked up.
Yeah.
But to know that you're on a team like that, right? Having someone that would go and borrow money from the mob to make sure you get your paycheck, that's something to look for if you're in sales and you're kind of trying to find the right company or the right fit. Who are the people behind the scenes? Like, who's really going to bat for you? What kind of, what kind of leader are they? Do they jump in the trenches with you and make sales? Do they get out there and get their hands dirty? Doug, that's, again, one of the things I love about you, man. You're literally willing to do that. I've seen it. We've gone out and done the Apex Evolution together and gotten dirty and gotten into it. And I would say that's one of your skills and one of your specialties, but I don't think that's really it, man. And one of the things I always like to ask on this show, because we work and we deal with so many sales professionals, everyone has their own little strategy. What would you say is your secret weapon when it comes to sales?
Man, and it's gonna be the cliche one. It really is. It's my ability to shut the fuck up. It really is. Like, it's my ability to shut up and listen and let them tell me how to sell them. Because if you let them tell their stories, if you let them tell their experiences with whatever product you're trying to sell them, or about their business, if you're doing B2B or something like that, if you let them get out a few stories and actually, like, vent a little bit, like their wives won't let them or their husbands won't let them, and don't try to solve all their problems in that moment, if you take the time to let that happen, then there's going to be a few nuggets in there. There's going to be a few nuggets in there that when you do finally give them the presentation, it's a home run. And that's the way I don't like overcoming objections. I don't like rebuttals. I don't like having to do a rehash or any of that stuff. I like closing, and it's a yes or a no, right? And if it's a yes, great. If it's a no, it usually has to do with I don't have the money right now. You know what I'm saying? And then we can work on payments or whatever we got to do there. But if I've done my job properly, by the time we get to the close, I've handled all the objections. I've overcame whatever blockers they have that would have stopped them from doing business with me today. And so, again, in my mind, I think the secret weapon is listening about 60%. Your intro and your close is about 10%, and then your presentation is about 30%. If you can do that, then I feel like you're always going to be in good shape. If not, at least you'll have given them a good experience, even if they can't afford the product.
Man, I absolutely love that. It's one of the biggest things that I recognize in younger, newer sales reps is when they come in, they're a little nervous, so they kind of go through things slow. They're kind of like, I don't want to miss anything, and then they get a couple of deals under their belt. They start feeling confident, and they start skipping steps, and they just go right to
Yep.
the close, right to the close, and it's like, well, I gave you 100 leads. What happened? It's like, man, they don't know this, that, whatever. It's like, well, hold on, did you do the whole thing though? Because like when you were following every step, we could see statistically you closed 25 of those 100. This
Yep.
last month, you only closed 5 of those 100. So, like, I have zero belief that you've gotten worse in your ability. The question is, where did we skip the steps? Because the steps are
Hmm.
always what really get us to that end result, and it's the questions that we ask, it's the rapport that we build, and more importantly, it's us shutting the fuck up and letting the client tell us what we need to hear so that we can truly help them solve their problem. And again, Doug, you're an expert at this, man. We've worked together for 5 years now. I know that you have this uncanny ability to just sit down, listen to what people are saying, where they're coming from, and point them in the right direction. So share a story about a time where you were like really going through that, and you were like, man, this is like I'm doing everything that I know, but it seems like this isn't gonna happen. But you still seemed like you turned it around. Tell me a story about like a deal you thought was totally lost, and then you managed to pull it out in the end.
Man, so that would probably be one of my first consulting gigs that I put together. I didn't even know what my offer was at the time. The guy just knew he wanted to work with me, but I didn't know how or what capacity. You know what I'm saying? And I also wasn't sure how to price it. I had talked to a few people in Apex and in the other groups that I was in and what was reasonable and everything. But when it comes to selling your time, that's very difficult to price. I think some of the greatest salesmen are some of the most, I guess, there's no better way to say it, humble, right? Some of the greatest salesmen are the most humble because they do follow the process. They trust the process more than they trust themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And when they hit all those points in the process, they make money. And they just follow the formula over and over again, right? And so, in structuring this, it was a 25K consulting package that I put together, right? This is the first time that I was pitching it and going through it and everything, and it was a home services company, and they had a in home team, right? They didn't do door to door. They got their leads from marketing, and then they scheduled in home appointments. And so he wanted to get his close rate from 22% to what I told him would be a lot more, would be doable, which is over 30%, right? There was some accent issues where I couldn't understand them half the time, you know what I'm saying? And so right away, we weren't able to build that rapport. You know what I mean? And that's incredibly important, but I couldn't understand them half the time. So I'm getting responses to my questions, trying to build rapport and everything, and I'm not understanding the responses. So you can imagine how difficult that was. And so then I go into the qualify, and luckily his COO came into the conversation at the time, was able to walk me through some of the things that I needed to hear and everything. But his COO was very standoffish, was very much like I was encroaching on his territory a little bit, which was
Hmm.
furthest thing from the truth. And I knew they needed my service because they didn't even have a comp plan written out. They didn't have a script, any of that stuff. There was no structure to it. It was one-to-one training for a total of 12 salespeople in the entire company. They were doing one-to-one training with every hire. It was like, hey, come with me. I'll show you how to do this. It's some of the most difficult training to stay consistent and to build a program on, right? And so it was very much like I was getting the brick wall and everything. And by the time I came to the presentation, I was like, I'm just gonna do this quick and dirty because I already know. I was already doubting myself, I guess. I already knew that this wasn't gonna happen. They didn't have the budget. The COO wasn't feeling it. And so I did. I literally spoke for 5 minutes about my process. I walked them through the audit. This is the program we're going to build. Here's some programs I've built before and what they look like. And then basically, I went through the close, right? And of course, at the close, he did the, hey, I'm going to talk to my wife. She's the real CEO, right? And then my COO, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get back to you. And so here I am thinking, oh, they're gonna get back to me, or whatever the case. And I wasn't trying to like hard close them. Normally I would have said, well, if you talk to your wife and you talk to your COO, and there's what would be the objection at this point? You know what I'm saying? So I was trying to draw it out or whatever. I would have normally done that, but by this point, the body language, the tonality, everything was off. So it was maybe like 30 minutes later, he calls me back and says, we're in. And so what I found out after working with that client for a while is he was originally from Trinidad. So they just have a different culture. You know what I'm saying? It's like Japanese culture. They don't have a whole lot of emotion. They're not big on anything but the business when they're in a sales conversation like that. So it was very similar. And so what I didn't realize was it was just like a cultural difference. And I was expecting them to like, be having a good time like we are right now on this podcast and be doing all these things. But that culture difference is what made me believe that, hey, this isn't going well and they're not about this. And then 30 minutes later, he calls me. He's like, I'm all in. What I also want to point out is I had been building my machine for probably at least a year at that point, and I hadn't been selling consulting at all. So what he told me was, I've been following you for several months already and seeing your content and everything, and that's why I reached out. But he didn't tell me that until after he engaged services with me.
Mm. Man, there's a lot to unpack from that story. First and foremost, that cultural difference in negotiation, that's so powerful, and it's not really something that you can train on until you're at like a very high level of sales,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know until you really start understanding like tonality and body language and certain and that next level of cultural understanding. Like I remember working in the tobacco industry, and like during the Christmas holidays we'd always get a lot of Asian people in, and they would be like just tough negotiators, and it was just like I never understood until I realized that was just part of their culture, right? That's just how they operate. And it sounds like you had this same kind of experience of thinking like, well, hey man, I'm fun and exciting and this is how I roll. They weren't
Yeah,
like that, and you were like, man, this is like I fucking screwed this deal up, only to find out they're getting ready to wire you 25 G's. Like, what a hell of a story, man. Like,
yeah,
those are some of my favorite. That's why I started this show too, because so many of us in sales, we have that experience. We go through these situations where it's like there's no way that anyone else has had to deal with this crazy shit. And for the most time, you're right. No one has had that specific situation, but we've all had some crazy similar experiences. And so, man, it's so cool to hear how you overcame that in your own life and situation, and also knowing that part you mentioned about building the machine, right? Getting that
hmm
know, like, and trust factor, having created enough content and goodwill in the marketplace to have the ability to walk in and say, cool, 5 minutes. I'm gonna do this, and this. Here's what you can expect. Here's what's gonna happen. It's 25 G's. What you want to do? And they're like, I'm gonna make the same objection that everyone is. I gotta talk to my partners, right?
yeah,
Because that's
yeah,
the world we're in. And I get it and respect it. I'm married. I speak to my partner when we make business decisions too, but usually it's before the
yeah.
conversation. Anyhow, point being, building the machine, creating that know, like, and trust, having that authority. There's so much to that we'll have to unpack in another episode, because I really want to be able to expand on that. And I know for sure those aren't the only two good stories you got, Doug. So we're definitely going to have you in for a part two. With that said,
Sounds good, brother.
you're a busy dude. I'm incredibly grateful that you took some time to be here with us today. I know you're out there building great sales teams, truly helping people get dialed in on these sales and follow-up processes. But before we get out of here, I always like to ask, man, I've got new followers, new listeners coming in all the time. Shout out to you guys that are sharing the show, putting it out there, tagging us at Call the Damn Leads. Like, we really appreciate that. But let's say someone finds the show, they're just getting into the sales industry. What would be like one piece of advice you'd give them so that they can go on and be super successful here?
So I would say, in being the tactical dude that I am, basically, whoever the company is that you're selling for, they're probably going to have some type of system or structure in place, right? But at minimum, you yourself should be able to create at least three prospecting strategies, right? Whether it's social media, cold calls, old leads, or something like that that company has, or maybe they have warm leads coming in. Whatever the case is, you should have at least three prospecting strategies. These are three different ways that I'm going to basically bring leads into the company, or sell new customers. And the reason for that is because it gets boring. If all you're doing is telemarketing, that's going to get boring. If all you're doing is knocking doors, that's going to get boring. So you want to be able to switch up your strategy whenever you need to in order to make it more interesting, right? And then you do. You're going to recognize, okay, I get higher quality leads from social media because they know, like, and trust me, versus these warm leads coming in that are from, an ad or something like that. They're motivated, but they're also shopping 2 other or 3 other companies, And so you start recognizing lead generation, right? And if you can at an entry level understand the marketing aspect of sales, then you're going to be an asset to whatever company you go into. If you can start bringing in your own leads, then one, they should be paying you higher commission on that. So recognize that if it's a self-sourced lead, they should be paying you at least the marketing cost of acquisition of their leads that they're giving you, right? And so you should be making extra money on those. But if you can start learning marketing with the sales knowledge that you're taking in and everything, you're going to be a machine. You're going to be able to go into any company, generate leads, close deals. You know what I'm saying? So I would really look at your prospecting strategies. At the end of the day, all those prospecting strategies really is a different form of marketing. In our case, it was door to door. So our marketing cost was zero. Our marketing cost was our time, right? But we still had a commission that we paid out for that. So that was the acquisition cost from marketing was door to door, right? And so I would really dial in those 3 prospecting strategies. Make sure you don't just have one, that you do have all 3.
It's like if you were going to go down to the lake and go fishing, you don't want to just show up with one lure. You want to take a couple because you never know when one might get lost or get stuck, or, hell, you could have a rainy day and you don't want to be out there knocking doors in the rain. So you're on there creating content, you're writing posts, you're connecting with people on social media. There's a million ways to make $1 million. If you can come up with 3 different strategies to go out there and meet people, like Doug said, you're well on your way to making that first 7 figures. And so, man, that's amazing advice. I know, again, there's so much more that I'm going to pull out of you in some future episodes because you're such a smart, tactical dude. And you're also awesome and have amazing stories. And that's the whole point of this show, is to come on, share some stories, talk tactics, and make sure that anyone that's in the sales industry has what they need to be successful. Doug, for those who've been listening that like your style, that like what you have going on, what's the best way for them to come and find you, see some of your training content, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I got a bunch of free resources on salesprogrambuilder.com, so you can check me out there. Everywhere I'm at on social media, I got chickens. I play rugby. I'm always showing off the family and then giving away sales knowledge and everything. So TXBizDad is all my social media handles. Doesn't matter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. It's TXBizDad.
Hell yeah, man. We'll make sure they're all in the show notes so anyone who's looking for them has an easy way to find you. And again, man, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, being a supporter of the show, the brand, the movement, and more than anything, taking the time out of your day to be here to pour into this community, because that's what's ultimately going to help us all take it to that next level. And if you're here listening to this, again, hit subscribe. Share this with your friends. Post it on social media. Tag @CallTheDamnLeads. Let us know that you enjoyed it so we can come on and create more content that gets you guys and gals excited. If you have an amazing sales story, come on, we all got one crazy sales story. I want to bring you on. I want to share it. Head over to callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send your information. Tell me a little bit of that story. Let's see how crazy it really is and bring you on the show. In the meantime, go follow Doug. Make sure you share this with a friend and go out there and call them damn leads. We'll see you next time.